Howdy folks. Things got a little confusing at the end of last class, so I'm putting together a quick video just to make sure that you can do the homework effectively. So here's the homework for this week. It's monkey themed. At the end of the homework, the last couple of questions are about using the stats programs we're going to be working with, Jasp and Jamovi. And we're also going to work just a little bit in Excel so you can get familiar with it. So the things we're going to be doing here are importing data, so bringing the data into these programs, defining variables or just making new variables, defining the levels for those variables. That's sometimes called labeling the variables, and we'll see what that means, but the brief introduction to that is sometimes you have your variables set as numbers. Say you're working with boys and girls, and I'll tell you right now, it's always a good idea to your variables set as numbers. So instead of having your data say boys and girls are boys and girls in words and letters, you'll usually want to have that data entered as zeros or ones. So boy equals 1 and girl equals 0, or however random way you want to set it up. And when you set up the labels or define the levels for that, that's just something that's going to set it up so it's easy to remember the numbering scheme that you came up with. Another word, another meaning for levels in statistics is the idea that each sort of categorical variable has a certain amount of levels. So, for example, the categorical variable gender has 2 levels, girls and boys. So it's really easy to get those two things confused. It'll be pretty straightforward once we get working with it in the programs. Okay, create and calculating variables. So creating new variables, oftentimes either by calculating something. Say we have height in inches and we want to turn it to height in feet. You got to calculate something out of the old variables to make your new variable. There's also, depending on the program, something that helps you turn variables from letter format into number format, so they're easier to work with. Finally, making a histogram and frequency chart. We covered this yesterday very briefly, but I'll make sure that you know how to do it in both programs. So let's get started. I've got a little bit of simple data here that I put together already. So this is an Excel file, and let me just open it up here, just so we are actually working an Excel file. So I got it. Here we go, in an Excel file. This is another file that I'm using for practice with the grad students. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got 3 variables, participant, and it has a participant number here. Useful trick in Excel, if you want to make the cell width as long as it needs to be to include anything in there, you can double click on the little corner. That's what I've been doing, and it makes it bigger. Now, when you're setting up your variables for analysis, it's always a good idea to make sure that the variable names are clean. And what does that mean? Well, here we've got a variable named favorite color, and it's got a space and it's got a special character here. You want to avoid any special characters and avoid any spaces, because those are going to mess up any programs that you use to analyze your variables. Why does it do that? Well, the analysis programs for any type of statistics are generally pretty close to being programming programs. And if you have any experience with programming programs, or even if you don't, one thing that's important to know is that all of those systems have variables, but another thing that they do is they use stuff like spaces and exclamation marks, anything that's a special character that's not a letter or a number. Those systems use those things to mean something else than they mean in regular English. So if you are naming a variable, you need to avoid any of those special characters. If you want to put a space in your titles, you put an underscore like this, and that's a pretty universal way of saying it's a space, but it's not the space, if you know what I mean. Okay, so finally we've got favorite color, black, blue, brown. I just chose the B ones, and height in inches. It's a pretty straightforward little set of data. Now, I said that it's a good idea to always have these variables as numbers. So right now we have this variable as a set of letters and words. So one way we can transform that is to make a new variable and call it fav color in number format. And I could just go through and say, okay, well, black's going to be 1, and blue's going to be 2, brown's going to be 3, and I could physically do that myself. But there's one other thing that you can do in Excel. It might make it a little bit easier for you, but this is kind of an advanced sort of thing. You don't need to know this for the homework, but I'll just show you how to work something. It's a little bit of programming, doesn't take too long to do. So let's say, again, we want to make fave color in numbers, but this time we're going to set up a little program that's going to do it for us. So how does this program work? Well, anytime you want to do something in Excel that's not just type things in, you're going to put in an equal sign. So once you've got that equal sign, that tells Excel that you want to do something. So if I say equals 6 times 9, hit enter, it's going to tell me what 6 times 9 is. It's 54. Now, what's actually in this cell is equals 6 times 9, but what will visually be there is the number 54. Okay, so what can we use that for? Well, there's a lot of little programming tricks that you can do. One of the simplest programming tricks is an if statement. And so what that's going to do is it's going to look at another cell, and it's going to say, if this cell matches something that you give me, then I'm going to say something. Otherwise, I'll say something else. So in this case, I'm going to say, if this square over here is equal to BLACK, you got to put BLACK black in quotes so that it knows you're working with a set of letters and numbers and not just a number. And it has to be exactly the same. Uppercase, lowercase, spaces all have to match perfectly. So if B2, that's this one, B2 is black, then we put a comma, oops, that's period. And so now it's highlighted this part here. If B2 is black, if that's true, I want B2, this square, to say 1. And if it's not true, I want it to say something else. So for now, we'll just say that it should say oops. And we'll close the parenthesis. And so now it's correctly labeled it as 1. And we can copy and paste this formula down by just clicking on this little square here and dragging down. And so what it's done is it's labeled everything that's black as 1 and anything that's not black as oops. So that's a little silly. We want these other things to be labeled too. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is replace the oops. And we're going to say, okay, well, if it's not black, that means that it should be something else. So we're going to make a new if. As you start to type in things in the equal sign system, it'll try and guess what you want to do. So you'll notice that it's been popping up with this little box here, and you can go up and down with the up and down arrows. I want this if thing. So if I hit tab, it'll fill in the parentheses that I need. And it'll give me this little box here kind of telling me what I should put in those parentheses to make this work. So again, if, and then we want to make sure that we're working in here, if that, if this is equal to blue, then it should be 2. Otherwise, and we're going to do another if here, if tab, you can use the left and right arrow keys most of the time to select the boxes you're working with. You can type in the box letter / number. You can also click it. Okay, so if B2 is equal to brown, close the quotes, then it should be 3. Otherwise, now we'll do oops. Okay. And so you'll see that we've got here kind of a purple parenthesis that says that these two parentheses go together. If we put another close parenthesis, now we've got red, and we should have one more parenthesis way over here, the black one. So if I hit enter, without that last one, it's going to go, whoa, something weird's going on. We found a typo in your formula and we tried to fix it. So Excel automatically realized, hey, you're missing a parenthesis. You should have 3 parentheses at the end to close these things. Do you want to do that? And you can say, yeah. Okay, fine. So now we've got a new formula here. So I'm going to again copy it down. And so it's going to transform black, blue, and brown into all of these numbers for me. Now, because what we've got copied here is a formula, one of the better things to do is I want to make this just the numbers. I don't want to copy the formula over, because remember in here we actually do have a formula. So I'm going to select all of this stuff, copy it, right click on a new column, and say that I want to copy this, not just and paste it as is, because it's going to say oops, because remember it's going to go 1, 2, 3. Okay, well 50 is not black, blue, or brown, so it should say oops. I don't want to do that. I want to just copy the values, which is literally the numbers or the text that's being shown there. And so if I do that and I paste it in, now you can see that in here it actually does say 1 instead of having the formula. And so now that I've done that, I can just put this on there, cleaned up our data a little bit so that now our data actually say these numbers instead of these things. When you have data that have numbers and that mean something else, it's always a good idea to have just another sheet here that has a key and that says, okay, well, 1, 2, and 3 are equal to black, blue, and brown. Okay, so we've done a lot of stuff here in Excel. Let's actually get started with Jasp and Jamovi. As a reminder, Jasp and Jamovi can't work with Excel files. So what we've got to do is go to File, Save As, or Save a Copy, and select CSV. That means a comma separated values file. So let's save that, and it's going to tell me that I've already got that there. Okay, fine. Excel doesn't like working with CSVs. It kind of makes a bit of a fuss. So let me just say that right now, when you open a CSV in Excel, it usually is going to look pretty much like any other Excel full file. But if we open a CSV using Notepad, remember that Notepad is a very, very simple program that all it has is just text. So this is going to show us what exactly is in that file. So what we have is all of our 4 variables, 5 variables, and they're only separated by these commas. And so that's why it's called a comma-separated values or a comma-separated variables file. So this is pretty much the simplest way you can have your data set up, and that's why it works with a lot of different programs. Pretty much any program is going to accept a CSV for its data. Okay, one more thing to show you, and this is kind of cool. If we open up an Excel file, and we open that with Notepad too, where's Notepad? There's Notepad. It's going to show us that in the Excel file, there's all this gobbledygook. There's all of this programming language that Excel knows how to read, but that nothing else knows how to read. So that's why we have to use CSV files. Some programs know how to read Excel files, but not everything. CSV files are more universal because what's in the file is literally the information, instead of some sort of coded version of that information. Okay. You don't really need to know that. That's just I always like to make sure I know why things work. So we're going to go ahead and grab Jasp. This is what Jasp looks like. This is what you need to know to proceed in the psych department. The whole department uses Jasp officially for its classes. So a lot of programs let you just drag and drop the file in. Jasp doesn't let you do that. So the way to access it is to go to the top left, hit open. Oh look, undergrad quiz 3 data. Well, we can't look at that right now. Let's go to the computer, browse, and we're going to go to my folder that we're using for this, MISC resources, broad intro video examples. Okay, so once you open up your CSV file, it'll look like this. And just to go back and do that one more time, you'll notice that in this folder, we only see the CSV file. The Excel file is in the folder, but because Jasp doesn't know how to use Excel files, it will only see the CSV file. So if your file is just missing, that might be an issue that you're experiencing. Down here at the bottom, you can see the types of files Jasp can work with. There's Jasp files, there's CSV files, there's text, and a couple other ones. Okay, so we're going to open up that CSV file. Again, we don't need the extra copy. It's going to load up the data set for us. Come on, Jasp, you can do it. Okay. So what we've got here is pretty much the same thing we had in Excel before, right? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables, and we can start to work with these. And this is where we're actually going to start to be able to answer some of our homework questions, because we've already accomplished question number 1, importing the data into Jasp. Next up, we should define the variables. Okay, what does that mean? Well, Jasp, by default, assigns the variables a variable type. So it's gone through and it said that a participant is a ordinal variable. If you click here on this little symbol, it's going to let you select the type of variable that you've got there. So the participant number isn't really an ordinal variable. We could operationalize it that way, but generally I would call a participant a nominal variable or a categorical variable, because we don't really necessarily have these participants in any order. That's just the random numbers that we assign to them. Okay, next up, favorite color. It's a categorical or a nominal variable, but this one's special because it's got that little A in the corner. And so what that means is that Jasp has noticed that you have text here in the squares. And remember, I told you you pretty much always want to avoid any text as much as you can. So working with text is possible, but you'll be limited a little bit in the options that you've got. And one thing, if we decide to turn this into a scale, it's not going to work because it's text. And we can't quite do that. Now, one thing that we can do, if you double click on any one of these variables, we can mess around with them just a little bit. Maybe just single click. Oh yeah, just single click, sorry. So what can we do when we open up this menu here? First of all, we can filter which variables we're working with. So if I only want to work with people whose favorite color is black, I can filter out the other ones. And so what that's going to do is it's going to gray out over here, and anytime we do anything up here, any descriptive statistics, t-tests, whatever, it's not going to show me data that's not been accepted by the filter we put in, which is only black. So I'm going to put that back. Value is the actual thing that's in the square, and here's the label that we were talking about earlier. Remember that for step 3 we can define levels. What I mean there is we can say, well, even though in here it says black, I'm going to say that favorite color black is going to be called 1 from now on. And you'll notice that when I hit enter, it quickly changes that stuff. So there's a couple reasons why you might do this. You often won't change words into numbers because you're losing meaning there. It's not really helpful for yourself. So I'm going to put that back to being just black. But you'll notice that when I had them as 1, actually, the value, the real thing in that square is still black. It's just what we're seeing, this label, is that 1. I'm going to put that back again, and we'll move on, and we'll see a better reason why we might label things. Here we've got height in inches, favorite color, and for number, right? So what we can do is click on this and say, well, 1 is not a very useful information for what my favorite color is. So we can set this 1 as black. And now that's very useful because we know that even though it says 1 in here, it means black. The other thing too is these variables are kind of messed up, right? Height in inches, that's not an ordinal number, that's a scale. Scale means nominal or continuous. The height that people have isn't in any particular order, but it is a number with meaningful bits in between. So we want to make sure that's a scale. Again, scale kind of means nominal. And favorite number, that's not ordinal either. Even though it is a number, it really should be a nominal variable, right? Because the number is just a label that we put on it. Finally, favorite color, NP is the same thing as over here, so we can go through and label that stuff again. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and label the ones for N, and I won't label the ones for P, just so we can see what happens when we have the same data but with labels. Okay, so that's done. I can exit out of here. Now let's see what happens when I click this little box here. This is the box for creating a new column. Now in Jasp, you can only create new columns that are computed. So a column is a variable, And a row is usually one set of observations. So it could be one participant. Oftentimes that'll be the case, but sometimes it might just be one set of observations. Say, for example, that every time the participant comes in, you want that to be a new row. You could do that, but most of the times you should set your data as one person, one row. Okay, so we click this to create a new column, and this is going to be a computed column that we're going to call height in feet. And we want this to be a scale. And the reason we're making this column is because we have height in inches over here, and we want to turn height in inches into a height and foot variable. So you can click and drag there, or you can just click on these things to make them appear. And we can say that height in inches divided by 12 is going to be what we have here for this column. Compute the column, and it'll do it for us. So the numbers here are actually numbers, 4.1667. We can't really add labels to that because they are a scale, but we can always mess around with the formula that we've got here by clicking on that little f of x, which usually means formulas thing. Okay, well, that was like a perfect example. I got everything right in one go. So let me show you just what happens if you mess up a little bit, just so you know if some of the things that might go wrong. For example, if we have height in inches, whoops, I'm clicking a little too many things there, set as an ordinal scale, and we did not correctly assign our variables, we can still bring it here into this calculated column for height in feet, but when we try to put it in the division signal, it's not going to work. It's going to give us this little red circle, and that's just saying that the variable you're trying to put in there doesn't fit. There are certain things you can do with only nominal, only continuous or scale variables that won't work with other types of variables. So how do you fix that? Well, assign your variables correctly, and now it should be able to, oh, no, it's still ordinal there. So let's put that in the trash can and get the new height in inches. And so now it's automatically trying to put it in for us. So that's one error that you might come up with. That's pretty easy to fix, and that happens if you haven't adequately named or assigned your variable type. So compute it again, all good. All right, so we've gone through and we've imported data into Jasp, defined variables, defined levels or labels, created and calculated variables in Jasp, and the last thing is how to make a histogram and a frequency chart. That's pretty straightforward. What you'll do is you'll go into descriptives and descriptive statistics. And so let's say that I want to learn a little bit about, say, everyone's favorite colors. Okay, we'll put that into the variables column, click it, you can click on the little arrow. I believe you can also just drag them in too. I want to learn about people's favorite colors and height in inches. So by default, it's going to give us some descriptive statistics. What the heck's going on here? Well, we have columns for each of the variables, and we have rows for the different types of information that we can get. You can choose the types of information here on the bottom left. You'll notice that you always have this sort of window setup where the rightmost window are the outputs, the middle window are the analyses that you're doing, and if we open this up just a little bit more, the leftmost window is going to be your data. And so you can manipulate that with the little arrows here. I believe you should be able to click and drag this so we can have these three windows set up. I don't really care about looking at my data right now, so I'm going to close that. And just only look at these two things. So what do we get when we put these different variables in? We get that extra stuff here, and you can kind of choose all the different types of information that you want. Now, we can ask for a frequency table, and that's only going to work for nominal and ordinal variables. So if we ask for frequency tables, it's going to try and give us one for all of these variables, but height in inches is not going to work. So it's only going to give us a frequency table for favorite color. And so what we have is all the different types of colors, how many people have each one of those as their favorite colors, and then the percentage of the total data and some other extra stuff that you don't really need to know. So if we have our different versions of the same variable, favorite color in number and favorite color, it's going to work exactly the same. But you'll notice that the one that has the variables set up as numbers, favorite colors and numbers, is going to show up as 1, 2, and 3 here. And that's not a very useful set of information. Here we have favorite colors and numbers, but we've given them labels. So that's going to give us the labels there, even though they're numbers. Finally, the ones that are just in text is going to give us the information. So remember that kind of the best of the both worlds is if you have your variables in numbers at all times with labels. Okay, so last thing, how do we get a histogram? So we can go into this plots thing and ask for a couple different types of plots. Right now we're just going to ask for a distribution plot, and it's going to do that for all of the variables that it can do that for. In Jasp, it can do that for any type of variable, and so it'll give us a distribution plot that's pretty much the same for each of the favorite color ones, but a little different for the height in inches one, just because this is a continuous variable, so it kind of has to decide what the x-axis is going to be. Remember that for distribution plots, the y-axis is going to be how many times each outcome comes out. So there are 2 people with a height between 50 and 55 and 1 person with all these other categories. Okay, so that's pretty much everything in Jasp. Let's close out of that. We don't need to save anything. And we're going to open up Jamovi and do the exact same thing, maybe just a little different so that you know the different functionalities of the two things. So Jamovi, when you start it up, looks like this. This is a blank data file. You can import things into Jamovi again by clicking those 3 little bars, open them up, and find your file here. But one thing that's different about Jamovi is you can import things just by dragging and dropping your data file. So let's try and drag and drop the Excel file. It's not going to work here because it says, I don't understand the file that you're using. So let's try doing the same thing with your CSV. And that will open it up. It just opened it up on my second monitor. Okay, so let's run through the other things that we did very, very quickly. We've just imported data into Jamovi. Next up, we need to define variables and define levels/labels. Okay, well, defining variables, same thing as Jasp. You can pick the type of variable you have by clicking, but this time you need to double click on those boxes, and it'll open up a little window that'll help you choose what type of variables you're working with. It's got little arrows so you can skip around between the different types of variables you have based on that same column order. So participant, it did a little bit of a better job than Jasp. It knows participant should be nominal. This is going to be favorite color is a nominal variable, and here you've got, instead of a type of variable, you have a different data type selector. So we're going to say that favorite color should be text. If we select integer or decimal, it's going to get rid of any text that's in there and just stick with the numbers. So we don't want to do that. But we can set up our labels over here in the levels section by putting in stuff. So we could set this up to be 1, 2, and 3. Not very useful, but we can do that. Okie doke. So let's undo that just by hitting Control Z. Again, we have height in inches. Oh, it didn't do that great of a job. Height in inches should really be continuous, and it's an integer. Just to be really clear, text is text. Integer are numbers that don't have decimals, like these numbers here. Decimals are numbers that do have decimals. So height in inches, it's fine for being an integer, but really it should be a decimal because your height can have decimals. Here again we have favorite color N, so we can set up this to say that 1 is black and 2 is blue and 3 is brown. Kind of messed up there on the blue. When we click out of it, things will be all set up like they were before. Okay, moving right along, what are we doing next? There are 2 different ways you can set up new variables in Jamovi. You can set up, if you click here, it's going to go, I want to make a new variable. You can also just click on the right to the end of your variable list and say you can make a new variable, you can make a computed variable, and you can make a transformed variable. So when you want to work with data in Jamovi, you can actually do that here. You can actually just type stuff in. That's one thing I didn't show you in Jasp. If you want to work with data in Jasp, you pretty much have to work with it in an Excel format. So if I just open this up again, open up my recent file, let's say I want to change this 1 to a 2, you can't really do that. But if you double click, it's going to try and open up the Excel file, and we can say, oh, well, this should actually have been a 2. You can then hit Save, Control S, close it, and it'll be changed here. So Jasp is not that functional in that way, but Jamovi is, because you can just mess with the data in here. So what other types of creations can we do? We can create a computed variable, same way we did previously. And so one thing that I'll let you know you do need to know for your quiz is how to create a computed variable that only selects certain things. So we're going to say we want to work with people who are taller than 60 inches. Okay, so to create the formula for that, you can click on this, and we're going to say that we want people who are in the height in inches column and who are more than 60. Okie doke. And so that's going to give us a true and false list here. So anyone who's taller than 60 is going to be true. And you can check that. Anyone who's not taller than 60 is going to be false. Notice that 60 isn't taller than 60 because we only put greater than. So if we put greater than or equal to, it would be a little bit different. Finally, the last type of column creation is a new transformed variable. This is a really, really useful tool because it lets you take another variable, say favorite color, and transform it. Here we're going to create a new transformation into a different set of numbers. So if we say that black is equal to, if the thing in favorite color is equal to black, and we have to get the exact right capitalization, then it'll be a 1. We have to put a double equals here just because, again, this is a programming language, and in Jamovi, one equal sign does not mean equals. So if I try to do that, it's going to go, whoa, I'm confused, what's going on? It should be a double equal sign. And so if we do this exact same thing, equals blue, and we finish out everything, it's going to go, something's weird. What's weird? The formula is wrong. If you want to test an equality, say, is this equal to that? Use double equal sign. Okay, thanks, Jamovi. All set. And so we can finish off with the last thing that we want. We'll say that equals equals. Well, let me just show you what this is. The thing at the bottom is our else statement. So if none of these things tell it what to do, it's going to put something else. So we can say oops. And so what's it done here? Oh, it's just turned everything into oops. That's kind of funny. Maybe we did not select the right variable. So we want favorite color to be oops. What's going on there? Shoot, this worked just fine a second ago. Well, let's just set it up for favorite color n. That should be a little bit simpler, right? So, there we go. Favorite color n worked just fine. If it says black in there, it turns into a 1, blue, 2, anything else turns into oops. Okie doke. So that's all the different types of variable creations that you can do. So last up, let's just do the same descriptives. Is that everything we needed to cover? Yeah. Histograms and frequency charts. To make those, again, you go into exploration and descriptives. And same thing, it's going to have this kind of 3-window setup. You can drag these windows. Generally, once you've got your data all set up, you don't need to worry about that, so we're going to close it. And I'm going to say, I would like to know about the people who are taller than 60 inches, and let's get a continuous variable height in inches. By default, it's going to give you, again, those little basic pieces of information in a table. You can ask for a frequency chart, and again, frequency chart's only going to accept nominal and ordinal variables. In this case, it's going to tell us, okay, for the nominal variable, who is taller than 60 inches? Remember that looked like a bunch of true and falses? It's going to say that there are 2 trues and 3 falses, which means that in this data, we have 2 people who are taller than 60 inches. Okay, now let's see what happens if we ask for a histogram. See, histograms can only be continuous variables. It says that because we have a little icon for that here. So we can ask for a couple different types of plots, like a histogram. It's going to think about it a little bit. Whoa, that's kind of funny looking. I think it's because I asked for a histogram and a density plot. Okay, there we go. So there's one of each kind of person here. Looks a little bit different from Jasp, but the data is exactly the same. If we ask for a density plot, it does look a little different. Oh, I see. They're putting the 2 of them on top of each other. So this kind of makes it look a little bit more normal than it actually is. So be careful about that. We can also ask for bar plots here. And it's going to give us a bar plot only for the nominal and ordinal variables. We can see that there's a little bit more people who are less than 60 or less inches, a little bit less people who are taller than 60 inches. Okay, the last thing here in Jamovi that I want to show you is how to set up a filter. Actually, maybe that's a little bit too much. We'll just skip that for today, and we'll cover that some other day. But there's the basic functionalities for Jamovi and Jasp. That's pretty much all you need to know for the quiz. You can accomplish the quiz and the homework using either or. I just want to make sure that you have these two options. Both of these programs are free, so you can use them anytime on your home computers. This video has gotten pretty long. Sorry about that. Let me know if you have any questions via email, or we can talk about it next week in class. All right. Have a good day.